Bentrovati amici del Festival della Chitarra. Adesso ascolteremo la prima masterclass del maestro Carlo Marchione. L'incontro è dedicato al Preludio della Suite 995 di Johann Sebastian Bach, basi, della, notazione barocca. Buona visione dal Mottola Festival.
Hello everybody, my name is Carlo Marchione. Welcome to this video, which I'm filming for the 28th International Guitar Festival of Mottola, Italy. Thank you very much to Maestro Michele Libraro for this opportunity, which is very, very welcome, especially in these crazy times we are experiencing at the moment. Anyway, it will be an online masterclass. In a masterclass, I have a score, so I have the score of the piece I am going to speak about in front of me. Unfortunately, I have nobody besides me, but I will do in the same way I would do if there was a real student. So you probably. I choose one piece which is kind of exemplar for studying and learning the basic of Baroque music on guitar. It's a piece which is played very often by masterclasses, and it's a piece I love the most for it because it gives the possibility to really speak about the most important elements of Baroque music and how to read correctly Baroque music. So it's not good only for this piece, but for all pieces of Baroque music you are going to read. Of course, there are some little things which are typical of this piece, but altogether is a perfect iconic piece of Baroque music. I'm speaking about the Preludium from the Suite Bach Werkverzeichnis 995, so the G minor lute suite. The first thing I would tell you would be if you want to practice not only Bach but any piece of any historical period, try to come the closest you can to the original source of the music, which is the composer. So try to get the manuscript of the piece you want to learn. If this is not possible, try to get a first edition. So it's an edition which was printed very, very likely under the supervision of the composer himself. And if both of them are not available, try to buy a so-called Urtext edition, which is an edition based on manuscript or first edition. So it's a quite reliable source. For practicing Baroque music, I always use a manuscript and an Urtext edition, also with my students. This enables us to write many things in the edition, but having always by the finger the manuscript to check if maybe one bow has been written correctly or there is an articulation which is strange or has been corrected in the edition, and we can always go back to the manuscript. So for annotations, fingerings, and stuff like this, a good Urtext edition is really good. For the so-called lute works by Bach, I warmly suggest the edition by Tilman Hofstock, and especially for this G minor suite is extremely well done. You know that this suite was an arrangement and Bach did of a previously composed cello suite, the Bach Werkverzeichnis 1011, in C minor. This was done for an amateur lute player, a certain Herr Schuster, as we can see in the frontispiece of the manuscript. By the way, however, it's very good, the Hofstock edition, because he puts on each other these two versions in the same tonality. So you can immediately make a comparison. And moreover, he adds a transcription, an adaptation from the time of Bach by a lute player of the same lute suite. So it's very interesting to see how in that time the concept of transcription or arrangement was intended. Not so strict like nowadays, but in a kind of more more as an arrangement more than a transcription, and it's full of ornaments, and it gives to us a very nice and interesting insight into the music of that time. So this is the premise. I should start to work on the piece by saying that many times what appears is not what it is. I can make you many examples with a language. For instance, if you ask not French-speaking person to read the word "oise aux," it would, if he doesn't know the pronunciation rule of French, she or we or he would never come on the idea that it's oiseau, so birds. Baroque music is a music which is very connected with the language and is very much counting on the general knowledge of music of the people, at least the people who musicians were living then, in that time. So many kind of notations are very short, very easy, but embody a very complex rhythmic. In other words, many rhythmical figures I'm going to explain are played quite differently than they are written. So the first thing we have to know, and it's very important, is in which musical form is written this prelude. Bach gave very often the title prelude to an opening piece, but he wrote this prelude in a kind of other musical form. So it's a musical form titled prelude. In this case, the musical form he used was, not surprisingly, a French overture. So to open, overture is opening, so he could open the suite with this piece. The French overture is a very interesting musical form, which was, let's say, invented, created by an Italian French adopted composer, Jean-Baptiste Lully, or his Italian version, Giovanni Battista Lully, who became the most important composer in France during the time of Louis XIV, so the king's son. On this topic, I would like to suggest to you to watch a wonderful movie titled Le Roi Danse, so the king dances, which is the story of Lully in this court of Versailles with the king. It's really very, very interesting and inspiring. So he created this musical form using a French part, which is the introduction, the slowest part, and the Italian part, the fugato, which follows the slow part. The French part is based on rhythms typical of the French dotted allemande. So it's an allemande which uses plenty of dotted rhythms. If you know the allemande of this suite, no? It's full of dotted rhythms, and those figures are used in the slow part of the French overture. And the fugato, it's the fugato, let's say, is normally the second movement of the sonata da chiesa of Italian origin. Very interesting, as I told you in the beginning, many musical figures were written in a kind of very easy and readable way, but embodied very complex procedure to play them. So let's go figure by figure. It's a kind of huge puzzle, the French overture. There are basically four major figures, rhythmical figures, which are always so assembled together, and it's very important to know how to read them and how to play them. The first one, I would say, is the easiest one, because it's basically played with the same rhythm in which she is written. It's written, but in a very flexible way. It's the so-called wavy figure. You see now on the screen is the very beginning of the suite. Is this? If you see also in the manuscript, the bow is written in a wavy way, which gives to us also optically the impression that this must be played not with a strict tempo, but with a very flexible tempo. But now watch out. Imagine to have a metronome which strikes the beginning of each bar. When you start with a metronome, you must arrive in the beginning of the next bar also with a metronome, with a metronome strike. So on this chord, you must be together with the metronome. So you can play with lots of flexibility, this figure, this wavy figure, but in a way that in the end, the tempo is stolen but also given back, the so-called Robin Hood rubato, as I call it. It steals from one side and gives back from the other. This figure is used in the piece 4 times. We saw in the beginning. Another time is here. The other time is here in C major. No? And here, the last time, in E minor. It's a wonderful, wavy, and, how can I say, very smooth figure. In contrast to this, the second figure is a so-called quarter dotted figure. It's in the end of You see that in spite of the fact that it's written like a dotted fourth followed by an 8th note, actually the 8th note splits into a silence of 16ths and it becomes itself a 16th note. So it becomes... In the treatises from that time, so vintage treatises, where the composer explained how to play their own music, they really stress very much on the fact that the short notes after the dotted note must be divided by the dotted note by a silence, una pausa di respirazione, so a breathing silence. This breathing silence affects, of course, also all the other voices. So in this case, the chord will not be 2/4, but just 1/4 with a dot. This figure is also to be found in many places. For instance, here in bar 4, and later, and it's found also here in this passage. Although with a trill, which I will explain later. It's also found here, etc. It's also found here, once more with a trill. You see that the F is in fact a 16th. Very related to this figure is the dotted figure with 8 notes. So the dotted 8 followed by a 16th. Also in this case, the 16ths were played a little bit faster than it was written. For instance, in this, it's not really, this is in tempo, and then it should be more. Always with this nice breathing silence within the notes. We found this once more in many places, like and then after and then later on to this and then the waltz sequence before the final cadenza. And then in the end, this. And so on, it follows the fugato. So you see, it's a kind of huge Lego construction with all the different rhythms. Now it comes one of the most interesting figures, which is, I call it the strong figure because it gives a sense of resolution and determined character. It's written like a tied 4th note with a quadruplet of 16ths, and then in the end it stops. So it's not like the beginning. This is also a tied 4th, and then it's followed by 3 quadruplets. There is only one, and it's very well described how to play it. It's absolutely not played the way it's written. It's not. On the contrary, you should give this tran, ta 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 tam. They even point out the fact that all these three short notes should be played with three different bow strikes and with lots of fire, as they say. So on guitar, of course, it's very difficult to play this ta 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 with a due precision, rhythmical and technical. I think we might add some slurs, because otherwise we would actually produce the opposite effect than it's wished by the composer. This figure is found many times in this prelude, in this French overture. So in the beginning, ta 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 ta, you see this, and after, yeah, maybe it's better to prepare already. So we find another beautiful passage with this strong figure. It's here. 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 So here is dotted 8. And here the strong figure. See? Here we have another time this. Very interesting is also in the end of this wavy figure. Albeit Bach wrote in one voice, and so unified voices, this as if they were one voice, but in fact, factually, they are two voices, and as such, the voice below should be played etc., etc. It's also very interesting in the end that just in the end of the cadenza, this you have. It doesn't make any sense that we have two times the same but two times differently in this case, being such a strong rhythmical piece. In fact, this B tied with the B itself, of course, and then A, G, F, must be played in a way that the last three sixteenths are not played as sixteenths, but like the three short notes after. So it should be is ta 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 ta. They are basically the same, are written differently because of the peculiar notation rules of the French overture. In other words, they should be played the same way, like. That's very peculiar. So remember, please, this last part and the part before with this chord. We are now going to speak about some important element of the piece, which really belong to Baroque music in general. The first is the trill. As I told you before, many times when we find a quarter note dotted, followed by 8 or more notes, we find very often a trill on the fourth note. The performance of this kind of trills is also described very clearly in the treatises of that time. We hold, let's say, the rule from the dotted fourth written that the 8th note is not played like an 8 but a 16th, and there is a silence of 16th before. So without trill, here would be etc. This kind of trills are started always with a strong appoggiatura. So the trill is written on a C, and the appoggiatura in this case would be a D, which is held a little bit longer, and after this the trill develops in a kind of accelerando. way. So it's not ti ta ka ta ka ta ka ta. We can practice like this. It's very good. We should practice in the beginning like this, but then giving a more elastic way. And with the diminuendo, very important, which is quite difficult to control with the left hand. Yeah, this one was good. We have some more of them. They're always quite annoying to play. This one, for instance. Okay, so remember the trill starts on the main note and it ends on the second beat of the note, or in other words, it ends where the dot is. So ti-ya-ya-ya, ta-ta, and then the end of the trill with the breathing silence and the short note. So not an 8th note, but a 16th. Very interesting is also the retroactive influence of the accidental. I explain myself. Nowadays, when we have a sharp on a C, for instance, this sharp influence all the C's which follow after this note until the end of the bar. In that time, this could influence also a C which we can find before that note, so on the left side of this note. But under two conditions. It must be at a very reasonable distance, so quite close to the note with the accidental, and must not be a structural note of the harmony, but a passing note or a grace note. Now, there is a passage in this overture, this one namely, which is very strange. We have a G natural and then a G sharp. It sounds quite strange, but in this case, look, the G is immediately before, it's a note just before the G sharp, and it's not structural, it's not a part of the harmony. So in this case, we can a no, which sounds quite weird. The G before, this G is much too far away from the sharpened G, so we can play it without any problem natural. But the G after, it should be, I think, sharp. And in our repertoire, in the Prelude of the 996, which is also written in the form of a French overture, we have a similar, very similar situation. We have a 7th chord, in this case, in the 3rd inversion. You have this. But it makes more sense that this C is twice sharpened, but in fact only this one is written with a sharp. Or, which makes much more sense. Our last remark on this first part is about the ornament signs. The first one we find is by the first strong figure, this it's an inferior mordent. Now, this typical sign, now this little wave with a line in between, we will never find any of these signs again in the whole suite in the manuscript. It's really weird because it's one of the most French ornaments, and yet in the most French suite we cannot find it anymore. There must be something strange. The only thing we find are those small notes you see now on the screen, which are normally played all like appoggiaturas, short or long. Well, I think that's quite unlikely that it should be like this. I think more that Bach, being also human, even amazing and awesome human, made just a mistake. He was writing on 2 pentagrams, which was normally the the set for a clavier piece, so a piece for keyboard instrument, and he just wrote the first ornament like he was used to do for keyboard music. Then he thought, oh wait, that's not for keyboard, that's for lutes. And normally nowadays we just would okay, with the Sibelius or Finale you just cancel it and you correct it. In that time music paper was really something very precious, so they would never throw away for a little mistake like this, a piece of paper, of music paper. So he held this ornament, but after that he wrote all the ornament as a small note in a way which was very close to the system they used for lute music, where it was not written most of the time which kind of ornament you have to play, but only with which note, or with the superior or with the inferior, or with the note below or on the upper note. So they gave, for instance, in the lute music, half circles up or down or besides the note. So in this case, I think we should take the responsibility as player to decide case by case which is the most proper, which is the most effective ornament we want to play. For instance, it's very nice, this beginning you have this. Here we can hold the appoggiatura very long, but here we should not. Why? Because here it's very dissonant, but if you play, it's just a fifth, it's not interesting. In this case, when you have an ornament on a dissonance, like in this case, like G, C sharp, or tritonos, we should play the appoggiatura very fast. It's not even an appoggiatura, it's just the note from which the trill starts. We could even play a little gruppetto, no, of three notes. So probably he was writing and one of his many sons was running around, or his wife was asking him something, we don't know. Or he just made a little mistake, which anyway gives to us much more freedom in the forming of, or in the choice of the ornaments in the whole suite throughout. The only other sign of ornament we find, as far as I remember, is the trillo, which is also typical of the lute music. And the last thing I would like to tell you is that the passage from the overture, the main overture, to the fugato, is not, the change of tempo is not random, it's not just faster. Bach wrote très vite, which is very fast, but yet I think in this I am supported by many doctorate works I read after I came myself on the idea, is that the passage is from a binary subdivision to a ternary subdivision, which means from a imperfecta subdivisions to a perfecta subdivision. Why the ternary subdivisions is perfect? Because it recalls the Trinity, it recalls the third place of the alphabet, which is filled by the letter C, which is the first letter of Christus. So it's a quite heavy symbolical number, the number 3 in Christianity. In this case, the passage is like the fourth, so the crotchet of the slow part becomes a dotted fourth of the fugato. So it's something like you see that in this way the fugato becomes really fast. On the other side, Bach didn't, I don't know how to say, didn't really mind if it was too fast or too slow. He just wrote pieces the way he wished and didn't care so much if it was too difficult to play on guitar or not. Yet if you play this piece, try to hold this relation within the overture, the main overture, and the fugato after it, because it will give this kind of turbo acceleration given not by the change of pulse, but simply by the change of subdivision. Where you had before 2 notes, now you have 3. Where you had 4, now you have 6. Okay, I hope it was interesting for you to follow this video. For the fugato, my suggestion is follow the cello articulation, even if the manuscript is by his wife, Anna Maria Magdalena. It's very reliable because she didn't play any stringed instruments, so she probably just copied early version of her husband. Pardon. If you have any doubt about what I have said, please don't hesitate to contact me through my website and ask me whatever you want about this piece, or suggestions, whatever. I'm at your disposal anytime. I thank you really very warmly to have watched this video until the end, and I hope you could take some good tips and some good information for your future. Thank you so much. I hope to see you next time. Bye.